of their deteriorating health problems with their teeth, they end up getting a lot of other worse problems and end up in the hospital.
Now, Damien's got a question.
Yeah, Bryce, I mean, it would seem that we've already got, when it comes to healthcare, we've already got non-universality in that we've got a community services card. So what would it cost if we simply did the same approach with dentistry as we do with general health in that regard?
I'm really not sure, but it would be something in the ballpark of, $150, $200 million a year.
See, that seems a lot more doable, doesn't it?
It's easily doable. So I actually think this is a campaign that is actually obtainable. This Labor government, they've already spent a lot of money on health, but they're also very sympathetic to this idea of universal dental health. Helen Clark is a big fan of it.
Yep. So, Bryce, they're streaming through here. One here. I work at a decile 3 school. One of my students recounted to me with horror how his father pulled his own tooth out with pliers because he could not afford a dentist. And that kind of really sums it up in a text, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, this is really the intersection of inequality, poverty, and a privatised health system, really. And so there's all sorts of horror stories. And as we've become more sensitive in recent years to the inequality problem, we're starting to notice, I think, a lot more.
Yeah, stay on the line, Bryce. Ali, isn't this down to education, though? I can actually clearly recall my first paid trip to the dentist, age 18, because the cost was so high. But I was thinking even then, more was realised, wow, I have to pay. But more could have been made. And it understood to me how vital it was that I book in regularly for a checkup. And ever since then, I go twice a year to the dentist, and it costs me a couple $100.
Yeah, I know, but you're lucky you can afford that. A couple of $100 is a huge amount of money, and it might just be a couple of $100 for you. If you've got 2 or 3 kids and, say, a husband or wife or whatever, that's a huge amount of money for a family to outlay for what I think is basic health care.
Well, the kids are free at the moment anyway, so it's only you and your partner. But what concerns me, Bryce mentioned the University of Otago opening up the dental school in South Auckland. I do worry that we sort of say, here's a good solution. We're going to get trainee dentists and student dentists to be our solution for, lower socioeconomic dental needs. Don't you think that's a little bit, I think it's great, maybe, but
no, I don't.
Second-rate dental care?
They're not second-rate dental care.
They're trainees, they're kids, they're students.
No, living in Otago and going to that dental training school, and actually that's where I had my teeth done for many, many years, they were first-rate.
Really? Would you get your appendix out by a trainee surgeon?
Different topic. What do you reckon, Bryce?
Oh, I agree. Yes, I've used the University of Otago Dental School as well. They do a great job. You do have to wait around a lot longer, and you have professors overseeing what the trainees are doing. So no, it's a pretty good way of doing it.
Very, very good. Hey, thanks, Bryce. Thanks for being with us. A huge response here. Dental care adults can go to their doctor and be referred to their local hospital for very cheap dental care. A lot of people are saying that. Now Peter Dunn says Damien Christie gets it right on the panel. Utter ineptness, nothing else, explains the current situation. But that's Peter's opinion there.
He was always pretty straight down the middle, though, wasn't he, that guy?
Oh, so fair enough. Yes, indeed. Look, and that's it. Thank you so much for all your... Ali, you've been great.
Thank you. I've loved it. It's been a whirlwind of a ride.
It's been a whirlwind drive, all right. So keep Cantabrians honest.
Thank you. Good to be on the program. Cheers.
And Damien, all power to you. Thanks so much for coming in. I'm Wallace Chapman for Jim Moore, and I'm back, tomorrow. See you then.
Kia ora, good evening. Welcome to Checkpoint. I'm Sharon Brett Kelly in for John Campbell. Tonight, dozens are missing and more than 100 injured after a powerful earthquake triggers a landslide on Japan's northern island of Hokkaido. New Zealander Mark Bryan was holidaying on the island and describes to us the moment the quake struck. Also tonight, beleaguered Broadcasting Minister Claire Curran is a no-show today in Parliament, while her colleague Meka Whaitiri returns for the first time since stepping aside as Customs Minister. The average price of fuel is now the highest it's been in more than 30 years. Moscow denies any involvement in the poisoning of a former Russian spy and his daughter in Britain. Activist Penny Bright speaks from her hospital bed.
RNZ News at 5. Maloa lele, good afternoon. Ko Katrina Batten tēnei. Formal complaints have been laid against the Deputy Police Commissioner Wally Homaha, accusing him of bullying. An inquiry is already underway into Mr Homaha's appointment, led by a senior lawyer, Mary Schultens. The inquiry was sparked when it emerged Mr Homaha made comments in 2004, defending police officers accused of raping Louise Nicholas in the 1990s. In Parliament this afternoon, the Justice Minister, Andrew Little, confirmed 2 complaints had been laid.
Police advise that they have received 2 formal complaints in relation to bullying allegations against Deputy Commissioner Wally Homaha. These have been notified to the Independent Police Conduct Authority in accordance with the usual process for these complaints.
The Justice Minister, Andrew Little. The complaints have been handed on to the Independent Police Conduct Authority. The Prime Minister has asked the Cabinet Office to issue guidance to ministers on using personal email accounts for government business. The under-pressure Broadcasting Minister, Claire Curran, failed to show in Parliament today after struggling to answer questions in the House yesterday about using her own Gmail account for ministerial business. Ms Curran was demoted from Cabinet and stripped of 2 portfolios last month after she failed to properly declare a meeting for the second time. Another minister answered questions for Ms Curran today after she requested personal leave this morning. The Deputy Prime Minister, Winston Peters, has defended Ms Curran.
Well, look, again, I said today we all have an off day, and you guys more than most.
Winston Peters. A 12-year-old boy and 3 other teenagers were armed with a knife, an iron bar and a wheel brace during a violent robbery on a Hastings liquor store that left a staff member with serious injuries. The victim remains in Hawke's Bay Hospital in a stable condition following the robbery of the Big Barrel store on Marae Kakaho Road on Monday. Here's our Hawke's Bay reporter, Anusha Bradley.
The 12-year-old boy was the 4th person to be arrested for the robbery. He appeared in Hastings District Court this afternoon alongside 2 males aged 17 and 18 and a 15-year-old girl. All have been granted name suppression. They are jointly charged with being armed with a knife, iron bar and a wheel brace and stealing cash, cigarettes and alcohol. The 18-year-old also faces a charge of grievous bodily harm. They'll reappear again in court next week. Ko Anusha Bradley aho.
Government investigators looking into how a Tauranga subdivision failed say the City Council could face sanctions. 21 homes in the Bella Vista housing development were deemed too dangerous to live in. The Ministry for Business, Innovation and Employment will review the Council's building control unit to understand why the shoddy construction work was signed off. It'll also look at some developments still underway in Tauranga and may investigate some that are completed. The Ministry's Paul Hobbs says the Council could face sanctions and the worst case scenario would be being stripped of its ability to issue consents.
I understand how frustrated people are, but the reality is until we get market study powers for the Commerce Commission, nothing more can be done. We need those ability to compel. Of course, it will be up to the Commerce Commission to decide how to use them, but there's been a lot of discussion about how the fuel industry will be a prime target for that.
The Registrar of Building Practitioner Licensing, Paul Hobbs, I think that was the wrong audio. The Energy and Resources Minister says the government can't do anything about petrol prices, which have reached record highs. The average price across the country is $2.30 a litre, but motorists in some remote areas are paying $2.50 or more. The government announced an investigation last year into rising petrol prices, but that's on hold until the relevant legislation is passed. At least 2 people are now known to have died and 30 are still missing after a powerful 6.7 magnitude earthquake hit Japan's northern island of Hokkaido this morning. The quake damaged homes and buildings and has knocked out power to millions. New Zealand's embassy in Tokyo says there's no information to suggest any New Zealanders have been caught up in the quake at this stage. Civil Defence is keeping an eye on parts of Hawke's Bay as more heavy rain and strong winds are forecast. A heavy rain warning is in place for the region until 3 o'clock tomorrow afternoon, with up to 80 millimetres more rain expected. Wairoa is of most concern and residents are being asked to reconsider non-urgent travel, with rural schools likely to be affected. Large swells on the coast near Homoana and Te Awanga are also forecast, possibly up to 5 metres today. Civil Defence says the rain and wind could topple trees and damage power lines. It's 5 minutes past 5. Sport, the unseeded Australian John Millman's US Tennis Open odyssey is over, following an energy-sapping quarter-final loss to Novak Djokovic. The Serbian star downed Millman 6-3, 6-4, 6-4 to reach his 11th semi-final in the humidity of New York. The reigning Wimbledon champion and 13-time major winner's victory sets up a semi-final against 2014 runner-up Kei Nishikori of Japan. The All Blacks coach Steve Hansen concedes first five Richie Mo'unga will face pressure and scrutiny like never before when he starts his first test. Mo'unga will run the backline in Saturday night's test against Argentina in Nelson, making his first start in the number 10 jersey, taking over from two-time World Player of the Year Bowden Barrett. Hansen says while Mo'unga is a two-time Super Rugby title winner, nothing compares to the pressure of Test rugby.
It's definitely extra pressure because it's not a super game. Test rugby is totally different to super rugby. So yes, there's pressure. There's always pressure when you're in the All Blacks because you're expected to play well, and it's not just the Canterbury fans now that are going to look at them, it's going to be everybody in the world.
Steve Hansen. And Trafalgar Park is a sellout for the match with more than 21,000 spectators set to watch. The ground's capacity has boosted with the addition of nearly 15,000 temporary seats. Meanwhile, in provincial rugby, Canterbury host Manukau tonight. World Surfing is riding the gender equality wave to pay parity, with both the men's and women's competitions to carry the same prize money from next year. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, William Dart pays tribute to the late Aretha Franklin. Our changing world tries physiotherapy on a smartphone. I thought they gave you RSI. And Raymond Songapolitelli is on the line from Clendon with his take on life, South Auckland style.
Russell, I've just got a quick question from a listener. Please ask about the cost of maintaining wind turbines. The better solution is solar and hydro.
Wind is still super cheap, but I totally agree we need lots more solar in the New Zealand system.
That's Lately with Karen Hay, 10 p.m. weeknights on RNZ National.
Met Service weather through to midnight tomorrow. Northland, Auckland, Coromandel Peninsula and Bay of Plenty. Cloudy periods and showers clearing from Auckland southwards this afternoon and easing in Northland. Showers returning tomorrow afternoon. Strong or gale southeasterlies about the Bay of Plenty tomorrow morning and afternoon. Waikato to North Taranaki, including western Taupo and Taumarunui. Fine spells increasing. South Taranaki to Wellington, cloudy periods and isolated showers, south or southeast gales in exposed places. For Gisborne, Hawke's Bay, eastern Taupo, Ranges and Taihape, rain heavy at times with possible thunderstorms tomorrow, southeasterlies, gales in exposed places. Wairarapa, mostly cloudy with showers, southerlies, gales in exposed places. Coastal Marlborough and North Canterbury, cloudy with isolated showers. For the remainder of the South Island, mainly fine, however cloudy periods about South Canterbury and North Otago, and for the Chatham Islands, occasional rain with southeast gales slowly easing. It's 8 minutes past 5 and you're listening to Checkpoint.
Good evening, welcome to Checkpoint. I'm Sharon Brett Kelly. To Japan shortly, but we begin tonight at Parliament, the day after Broadcasting Minister Claire Curran put in one of her worst performances in the House. Today, she's failed to show at Parliament, instead taking personal leave. National MP Melissa Lee had more questions for Ms Curran today, but instead her colleague Megan Woods, who recently picked up Ms Curran's government digital services portfolio, was left to answer on her behalf. Our political reporter Joe Moyer has been in the House watching it unfold.
It's been a bad few weeks for Claire Curran, who was demoted from Cabinet after failing to properly record a meeting for the second time. This second strike was in February when Ms Curran met with Derek Hanley at her Beehive office in her capacity as Minister of Government Digital Services to discuss Mr Hanley's interest in the vacant Chief Technology Officer role. The meeting had been arranged via Ms Curran's personal email. Yesterday, National's Melissa Lee was on her case, asking what government business she'd been conducting using her personal Gmail account. Here's Ms Curran fumbling through her response.
To the best of my recollection, I haven't used my. I've answered OIA responses and personal and parliamentary questions correctly. And to the best of my recollection, that's what I've done.
Ms Lee was set to push the issue again today, but Ms Curran didn't show for question time after putting in a request for personal leave this morning. Instead, her colleague, Megan Woods, was left to answer on her behalf. But that proved difficult given she had next to no detail of Ms Curran's movements.
What government business has she conducted via Gmail apart from arranging a meeting with Derek Henley when she was Government Digital Services Minister?
Mr Speaker, I don't have that information to hand. If the member would like to put that question in writing, it will be answered.
Supplementary. What is the Minister scheduled to be doing between 2 p.m. and 3 p.m. on Thursday, 6th of September 2018?
Mr Speaker, I don't have that information to hand. If the member would like to put that question in writing, it will be answered.
There's nothing specific in the Cabinet manual about using personal email accounts, but yesterday the Prime Minister asked the Cabinet Office to issue guidance to ministers, which is expected to happen this week. State Services Minister and Leader of the House, Chris Hipkins, says there's nothing unusual about ministers using various forms of communication to conduct business, but if it fits the bill of being official information, then it has to be recorded.
Doesn't matter what the mode of communication is, the test is whether it's official information. And ministers need to make sure that they've got systems in place to capture that.
Deputy Prime Minister Winston Peters, who is studious about his own attendance at question time, defended Ms Curran's poor performance yesterday and her failing to front today.
Well, look, again, I said today we all have an off day, and you guys more than most.
From Parliament, for Checkpoint, Joe Moyer.
And Checkpoint has asked Claire Curran's office for an interview today. Our request was declined. We asked if the Minister would be free to talk to us tomorrow instead, and were told she would be unavailable tomorrow as well. Meanwhile, Claire Curran's colleague, Meka Whaitiri, returned to Parliament this afternoon for the first time since stepping aside as Customs Minister over an alleged altercation with a staffer. She's been working from her Ikaroa Rāwhiti electorate since last Friday when it was announced Ministerial Services was investigating a staffing matter. Here's our political reporter Craig McCulloch.
Today was meant to be a celebration for Meka Whaitiri, the passing of a treaty settlement bill for the iwi and hapu of Wairoa within her Ikaroa Rāwhiti electorate. Instead, she returned to Parliament under a cloud.
I'm cooperating fully with the investigation. I've got no further comment.
The investigation by Ministerial Services is into a staffing matter. RNZ understands it focuses on an alleged altercation between Ms Whaitiri and her newly employed press secretary in Gisborne on Monday last week. Ms Whaitiri's declined to comment while the inquiry is underway, and today she persisted.
Today is about Wairoa, and I'm here as a local MP, proud to be the local MP for this historic settlement. It's $100 million for 25,000 people of the hapu and iwi of Te Wairoa, and I'm so proud to be here to support and stand strong with them.
The MP was flanked by her fellow co-chair of Labour's Māori caucus, Willie Jackson, stepping in to draw the questions to a close.
Should you be drawing a ministerial salary?
We're going to take her now because she made her statements. She's here for her people, our people. No, well, she's not. She's not here to answer your questions. She's here to support her people.
Should you be drawing a ministerial salary?
It's not clear whether Meka Whaitiri will be back at Parliament again next week, or whether today was a once-off. Labour's Deputy Leader Kelvin Davis says the MP's attendance at Parliament is between her and the Prime Minister, who wasn't there today.
The Prime Minister said you could not be here for part of the time, so she's here today. Good on her. Yeah.
And the Deputy Prime Minister, Winston Peters, also doesn't have a problem with Ms Whaitiri's absence earlier in the week.
We have a proxy of 25% in every political party. Every party's using them. She's got one of the biggest constituencies in the country. So what really is your point?
The investigation is expected to take 2 to 3 weeks. Atu iti whare parimata mō te hōtaka o te ahiahi, ko Craig McCulloch ahu.
Dozens of people are missing and more than 100 injured after a powerful earthquake triggered a landslide that engulfed houses on Japan's northern island of Hokkaido. The magnitude 6.7 quake struck just after 3 a.m. in the morning and was followed by a series of short, sharp aftershocks. New Zealand vet Mark Bryan is holidaying in Hokkaido after a conference and a short time ago told me he was in the city of Oberhedo when the quake struck.
Yeah, in the hotel room I had to set my alarm for 4:15 to get on the bus to
to get to the airport, and then about 10 minutes past 3, I was woken up with a tremendous alarm, which I thought was mine. And anyway, it turns out to be the earthquake early warning system. So all the lights came on and the sirens started going, and lots of Japanese shouting, and we were evacuated out of the hotel. I was on the 9th floor, so it was a field shake actually.
So the alarm went off and then the quake hit?
I think what happens is they have an early warning system, and it's linked to everybody's phone and all these hotels, and so from what I can remember, it was 3 o'clock in the morning, but I woke up, wondered what was going on, and then sort of realised, whilst I was putting my clothes on, I felt the shake. It was a decent sized shake, and all I could think about was obviously Christchurch and how Japan's had similar sort of experiences. So I just melted down the stairs and out into the street.
And what was it like once you got out on the street?
It was very organised. It was very ordered. Everyone was very calm. Everyone sort of came slowly out, and there was no power. We still got no power on the island. Everyone was just milling around in the street, and then eventually about 4 o'clock we were let back in, and that was about it really.
And can you describe the damage around you now? You're on a bus at the moment. What's it like?
Yeah, well, most of the roads have been closed. So I was on a bus to the airport, and of course it's limited information. Plus, my Japanese isn't very good, so I've managed to get the bus to the airport, but it had to take an hour or so extra because the roads were closed. Then, of course, we got to the airport, and the airport's shut, and there's really nothing happening. There's nowhere to go, and everything's stopped working, and there's no power. So the only thing I could do was wait for another bus to get all the way back to where it came from, which is what I'm doing at the moment, and try and find another way out and get to Tokyo.
Can you see much damage around you?
No. There's been a bit of damage in the roads, and there's been a bit of the odd sort of tile falling off the roof, but I haven't seen much. More damage from the typhoon that came through yesterday, actually, with trees down and things.
So the typhoon actually hit that part of Japan as well?
Well, I think the tail end of the typhoon flicked the North Island, flicked Hokkaido yesterday, and it brought a whole bunch of trees down. We were driving back from Sakidahi and got stuck behind a whole bunch of trees that were blocking the road. That was yesterday, and then this happened last night. But on the bus, on the TV, on the Japanese TV, they got lots of TV pictures of collapsed houses and landslides and whatnot. I haven't seen anything that severe at all.
Mark, have you experienced an earthquake before?
Well, only mild ones. We actually felt, I'm based in Winton, we actually felt the second Christchurch earthquake in Winton, but obviously these are minor compared to something like this. This was quite big, really.
So this gave you a bit of a fright?
I think it was a fight at the time, but I think it was more afterwards, and you realise that, of course, it's just the trouble with earthquakes, isn't it? You don't know. It was big enough where we were, but you don't know where it's centred and what other damage it's done. And once you've realised the scale of the damage, and it's basically impacted the whole island, everything's shut down. It gives you a bit of a better concept. It's a bit more scary then, really.
And you've been feeling some pretty sharp aftershocks as well.
It's been the odd aftershock. I can't say it's been nothing too dramatic, to be fair.
And Mark, what do you think about how it's been handled by the Japanese authorities?
Well, I have to say that their early warning system, or whatever it was, and I'm not overly familiar with it, but it was remarkable. Everybody out in the streets, everybody organised, very calm. That was remarkable. I think the post tremor is probably a little bit disorganised. Nobody seems to have power, and I've got friends back in that hotel who are staying on for a couple of days, and there's still no generators or any power anywhere. So, but I think they've shut the power down just to protect the nuclear power plants or something. I'm not quite sure what's going on. It's hard to get. Most of the news is coming from outside. Obviously, most of the limitations are my limitations because I don't speak Japanese. So So I can't really blame them for not communicating with me very well. They've probably got more important things on their mind than me.
And how are you going to get home if you can't get on your flight today?
I spoke to Air New Zealand. They've been very good, so we just pushed the flight back for a couple of days. The biggest problem is I can't get to Tokyo, so I've managed to get a flight out of Hokkaido Airport on Saturday. I'm not quite sure if it's going to go, though, but I've booked it. So if not, I think, I've got 2 days to get a bus or something to Tokyo, because all the trains are stopped, because the trains all work on, obviously they need some sort of power. So the trains aren't going, so the only option to get to Tokyo is a bus, if I can, if this flight isn't going on. But I'll get to Hokkaido Airport and today and find out what the story is there, and I've got a day or so to sort myself out.
And that's New Zealander Mark Bryan speaking from Hokkaido, where a 6.7 earthquake struck overnight. Auckland's self-titled anti-corruption campaigner Penny Bright has taken her stubbornness from Auckland Council to Auckland Hospital, where she's now defying doctors with her cancer prognosis. Ms Bright, a colourful, controversial activist, was rushed to hospital late last week and given until yesterday to live after complications involving stage 3 ovarian cancer. Most well known for her 11-year-long battle with Auckland Council over her rates, which she refused to pay until the council opened its books. Ms Bright, speaking to Zach Fleming from her hospital bed this afternoon, said she believes her cancer worsened because of that battle.
The Public Records Act is not being implemented or upheld, and what I've tried to do is to work with them to fix it. And no, they've been out to crush me. I believe that Auckland Council is responsible for how I am. The stress has been enormous, and it's just gone. It just went straight to my guts.
Ms Bright also lamented what she called the media's dismissal of her and her battle with Auckland Council.
And here I am wing-clipped, supposedly on my deathbed, and I've had more attention being paid to what I've been bleating on about for the last 20 years.
Does that frustrate you?
Better late than never.
It's Penny Bright speaking to Zach Fleming from her hospital bed, and you can hear Zach's full interview here on Checkpoint just after 6 tonight. Well, the average price of fuel is now the highest it's been in more than 30 years, and it could soon get even more expensive. The price of 91 octane has now exceeded $2.30 a litre nationally, with some parts of New Zealand paying $2.50. Mariana Johnson reports.
At a Wellington Central petrol station, motorists paying $2.35 a litre are feeling the pinch.
So you just filled up. How much did that cost you?
$118.50.
How do you feel about that?
It's shocked. A lot more than it's usually about 103 or something like that.
Have you seen the prices? 2 cars, one's $120. Little Suzuki Swift, $70.
11 Plymouth, so it's $100 plus every week or so. So yes, painful.
You've got to be so much more organised. There's no jumping in the car and taking off because it's that expensive. You can't afford to make mistakes.
Prices across the country have been rising incrementally, with motorists in the main centres paying about 35 cents a litre more than they were paying 2 years ago. Motorists in Wanaka and Waiheke have been hit the hardest, with prices already at $2.50 or above. And it's only set to get worse when a national fuel tax of 4 cents a litre comes into effect on October the 1st. The AA says prices are the highest they have been since 1985 when adjusted for inflation. Over 80% of AA members are concerned about petrol prices. Larry Green created Gaspy, a New Zealand fuel-finding app, and says he has watched helplessly as prices continue to rise.
You know, all we're doing is really watching the price go up and trying to find the cheapest price near people and share that information with them. But, you know, it would be better if we didn't spend all our time desperately trying to find a price that wasn't extortionate.
Mr Green wants the government to do more to stop fuel price increases.
We've seen, these calls for inquiries again and again. We've seen politicians say they're doing inquiries. We've had absolutely no results. We've had 0 results.
The government announced an investigation into fuel prices in December last year, but it is on hold until the Commerce Amendment Bill goes through Parliament. The bill would compel fuel companies to provide data to the government. Minister of Energy and Resources Megan Woods says her hands are tied until the legislation passes.
I understand how frustrated people are, but the reality is until we get market study powers for the Commerce Commission, nothing more can be done. We need those ability to compel. Of course, it will be up to the Commerce Commission to decide how to use them, but there's been a lot of discussion about how the fuel industry will be a prime target for that.
The Transport Minister Phil Twyford said the record high petrol prices will not change the government's fuel taxes. In a statement, Mobil Fuel says the prices have been driven predominantly by increased product costs and fluctuating exchange rates. Z Energy says barrel prices are really high at the moment and increased at the start of this week, which in combination with a low Kiwi dollar has seen the pump price increase. For Checkpoint, Cormediana Johnson TNA.
First five Richie Mo'unga will finally get his chance to steer the All Black ship, with coach Steve Hansen making 7 changes to his starting 15 for this weekend's Rugby Championship clash with Argentina and Nelson. Mo'unga fills the rather large boots of Beauden Barrett for the first test ever played at Trafalgar Park, a sellout too, with the Crusaders playmaker getting his first real taste at the top level. So will the 24-year-old ace his exam? Well, rugby reporter Joe Porter is in Nelson.
Yankees bangs it across. Mo'unga coming forward to meet this. Did it beautifully and burst away. Richie Mo'unga turns it away for Good Hugh. Oh, too good.
Richie Mo'unga guided the Crusaders to a second consecutive Super Rugby title this season. Named man of the match in the final, many fans were baying for him to start on the biggest stage.
Just a dream come true, I guess. There's a lot of hype and a lot of messages from my family and friends, which is, overwhelming.
But not as overwhelming as his desire to wear the black jersey.
I can't wait. Yeah, it's something I've aimed for and something this year I've had in my head is something I've wanted to achieve and to start in a test match. It's an exciting time for my family and they're all pumped.
The All Blacks should beat Argentina, but Mo'unga won't get an easy ride, with first-choice halfback Aaron Smith and first-choice second five Ryan Crotty being rested. Coach Steve Hansen says it will be a test of the 24-year-old's mental fortitude, but he's backing his boy.
Test rugby is totally different to Super Rugby. So yes, there's pressure. There's always pressure when you're in the All Blacks. It's not just the Canterbury fans now that are going to look at him, it's going to be everybody in the world. There's no doubting his playing ability. He can play footy. I'm confident that he'll front up and play really well.
At 27, Nehe Milner-Skudder is fast approaching the age many great wings expire, but the injury-prone Hurricane is finally back after dislocating his shoulder last October.
See, it's been a bit of another roller coaster the last year or so, and you and Shandy read the team out and my name featured. I was pretty pumped and had a big smile on my face, so bloody excited.
Hansen is also excited by the return of a winger who doesn't really fit the modern mould.
He's only a little bloke. He's not going to run over the top of you. He's going to run round you, or like he can step on a sixpence. And he's a good man, and he's got a skill set that is unique to him. Like what he's doing is inspiring young kids to be able to say you can still make it as an All Black at my side. So I kind of like that.
His old coach and teacher from high school, Josh Stewart, says Milner-Skudder's mum has a lot to do with her son's ability. Nehe agrees.
She's had a massive influence, not only on myself but the older brother and sis, and a lot of people growing up around Palmy and our family, and I owe a lot to her. She's sort of been a massive rock in our upbringing, and my mum as being sort of a big reason why I'm here.
So is mum coming to Nelson to watch?
Trying to, yeah. It's a bit of a trek from up the east coast, up Ngāti Porou way down here, but usually that doesn't stop her. So I'm hoping that she'll be in the stands cheering me on.
With a logjam of talent out wide, Milner-Skudder is running out of time to cement his place in the All Blacks before next year's World Cup in Japan. His Manukau coach Jeremy Cotter has no doubt Nehe will be in the land of the rising sun.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, he's got a point of difference, as he showed in the last World Cup, and every time he gets the ball, something happens. So he's got the ability to beat defenders and create play for, little half opportunities for players around him as well. Get him back on the paddock with the All Blacks and the opportunities will open up. Definitely think he's got what it takes.
Milner Scudder's first chance to prove that is on Saturday night against the Pumas at Trafalgar Park, where he'll be hoping to hot-step his way into a permanent place on the All Blacks wing. Mō te hōtaka o te ahi pōnei, ko Joe Porter aho.
It's 5:30. Coming up, Moscow denies any involvement in the poisoning of a former Russian spy and his daughter in Britain. More than 250 people attend a Mycoplasma bovis meeting in Dargaville, and a mystery illness that strikes down more than 100 passengers on board a 13-hour Emirates flight from Dubai to New York. Well, we'd love your feedback. Don't forget you can text us on 2101, you can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, Facebook us as Checkpoint with John Campbell, or email checkpoint@radionz.co.nz. But first, here's Katrina Batten with the headlines.
The Prime Minister has asked the Cabinet Office to issue guidance to ministers on using personal email accounts for government business. The under-pressure broadcasting minister, Claire Curran, failed to show in Parliament today after struggling to answer questions yesterday about using her own Gmail account for ministerial business. Ms Curran was demoted from Cabinet and stripped of 2 portfolios last month after again failing to properly declare a meeting. Formal complaints have been laid against the Deputy Police Commissioner, Wally Homaha, accusing him of bullying. An inquiry is already underway into Mr Homaha's appointment. That was sparked when it emerged Mr Homaha made comments in 2004 defending police officers accused of rape. The Justice Minister says the complaints of bullying have been handed on to the Independent Police Conduct Authority. A 12-year-old boy and 3 teenagers were armed with a knife, an iron bar and a wheel brace during a violent robbery on a Hastings liquor store on Monday. The staff at the Big Barrel store suffered serious injuries and remains in Hawke's Bay Hospital in a stable condition. The 4 arrested appeared in Hastings District Court this afternoon, charged with having weapons and stealing cash, cigarettes and alcohol. A memorandum of understanding to allow public access through a Central Otago farm bought by an American will be finalised within weeks. Matt Lau, a broadcaster, bought the lease to Hunter Valley Station, which borders Lake Hawea, for $13 million last year. Mr Lau's lawyer and representatives from Land Information New Zealand and the Department of Conservation met today to talk about access through the station to the Hawea Conservation Park. An end may be in sight to the scallop wars between British and French fishermen. The French accuse British boats of fishing unfairly. The British government says it's agreed the principles of a deal with France, and more talks will be held this week in a bid to resolve the tensions. Those are the headlines. I'm back at 6 o'clock.
Kia ora, Katrina. Turning to business news now with Nona Peltier. Now, Nona, the head of the FMA got stuck into the financial services industry today. What happened?
Well, he was invited to give a speech to the Financial Services Council. This is the head of the Financial Markets Authority, Rob Everett, and his speech was quite hard-hitting. It's probably more hard-hitting than we're used to hearing from the Financial Markets Authority. Talk to the industry about the lack of trust. We've seen recently what's happened in Australia with the Royal Commission there into the misconduct of banking, insurers and so forth. Well, he talked a bit about that to the industry, and he said, certainly there's some serious concerns that have been raised. And he said that we had something to learn from what's been happening there. And this is a little bit from his speech today, and this is Rob Everett speaking to that conference.
We are determined to play our part, ensuring that this is treated as an opportunity for you, the industry, and an opportunity for us, the regulators, to ask some hard questions about how the industry behaves, about how we regulate it, about what we're all here for. We hope that at the end of that process, a truly customer-centric industry will be in place, or at least working towards being in place, because we know that doesn't happen overnight. So you could say, if you look back to the GFC, that what we're in now is the second phase of the financial crisis, and certainly a crisis in trust.
chief executive there of the Financial Markets Authority, speaking to the Finance Council this morning. And so Rob Everett, well, his words, you know, certainly would have
Pretty
resonated
tough.
with that group, yes.
And what's been the response from the financial services industry?
Well, I think they've been up for it. They know that this was coming. To some extent, they came up with their code of conduct was also released today. It's got a number of points, 9 points, all sorts of things to do with ethical standards, what's the customer perspective, and what does it mean to deliver good outcomes to consumers. And the last and final point is that members must treat their customers fairly. And certainly the FMA, you can expect there'll be a crackdown. They've even threatened to, you know, name and shame companies that don't don't come into line.
Don't go by their code of ethical
standards. That's right. It's really become quite an issue. And they said, you know, it's not just, okay, sure, you know, companies talk about having to put shareholders first and investors first and so forth. But he's saying at the heart of our regulation is to put the customer first. And I think customers should start demanding that is actually what happens. So.
Well, we'll see what happens. Now, I hear it's been a sea of red for the markets today.
Oh, it's really not been a good day for the markets. So following in from Wall Street, we heard some evidence that was given by Facebook and Twitter today that saw the tech stocks fall quite heavily. But since then, the jitters that came overnight through the emerging markets in response to this rising tension with global trade really has saw a huge sell-off in the emerging markets. Those are the markets that are not in necessarily OECD, like, you know, Argentina, for example, and others. Well, that lost about $1 trillion of value overnight. Wow. So that's quite substantial. That concern has now come back into the market as Asia opened. And certainly we've seen that in New Zealand. We dropped 1.4% today. That's a significant drop. That's 126 points to 9,102. But it was on light volume because most of the analysts and so forth and market players were writing corporate reporting season reports to their shareholders, and so not so busy trading in the market. So that's kind of a relief that it was only on light volume. But among the leaders that fell, A2 Milk, which is of course New Zealand's largest company now, it was down more than 4%. Synlait Milk, again, down nearly 5%. And that follows the global dairy trade auction the day before where prices fell. Air New Zealand down nearly 4%. Ryman, the retirement village operator, and Fisher & Paykel Healthcare, both down nearly 3%. Quite substantial falls.
And so read across the board in New Zealand today?
And Australia too. And the dollar, it perked up a little bit. That's mostly because there's so much uncertainty about what's happening with what Donald Trump's next move is with trade. There's a deadline looming today with the talk that another tariffs may be imposed on another $200 billion of Chinese imports. These are the talks that we're supposed to be concluding today. There's not really any sign that that's ended satisfactorily. And there's also talks going on with Canada and the U.S. over the North American Free Trade Agreement. That's also not looking that, the outlook there isn't that good. So yes, of course, trade tensions are very high, and our dollar is trading at 65.8 US cents, 91.8 Australian and 51 pence. And it's worth noting the Australian dollar is also quite low.
Thanks very much, Nona. That's our business reporter, Nona Peltier. Well, Moscow is denying any involvement in the poisoning of a former Russian spy and his daughter in Britain, despite the identification and naming of 2 Russian suspects. After looking at 11,000 hours of CCTV footage, British prosecutors say military intelligence officers Alexander Petrov and Ruslan Boshirov carried out the Novichok nerve agent attack on Sergei and Yulia Skripal in Salisbury in March. They've been charged with numerous attempted murder charges in absentia, as their whereabouts are unknown. With the day's major developments, here's the BBC's Gordon Carrera.
2 Russians now stand accused of the Salisbury nerve agent attack. It's claimed that in March they deployed the Novichok nerve agent, which poisoned Sergei and Yulia Skripal, and which months later accidentally contaminated Charlie Rowley and killed Dawn Sturgis. Police say they came to the country as Alexander Petrov and Ruslan Boshirov, but those are thought to be false names used by 2 undercover operatives.
The government has concluded that the 2 individuals named by the police and CPS are officers from the Russian Military Intelligence Service also known as the GRU. The GRU is a highly disciplined organisation with a well-established chain of command. So this was not a rogue operation. It was almost certainly also approved outside the GRU at a senior level of the Russian state.
The two men, police say, carried out a remarkably sophisticated attack. They flew in from Moscow shortly after it's alleged they smeared nerve agent on Sergei Skripal's front door, and their weapon, the perfume bottle used to carry the Novichok nerve agent.
Today's announcement by the Crown Prosecution Service marks the most significant development in this investigation. We now have sufficient evidence to bring charges in relation to the attack on Sergei and Yulia Skripal in Salisbury, and domestic and European arrest warrants have been issued for the two suspects, and we will be seeking to circulate Interpol red notices.
Prosecutors say they have enough evidence to charge the two with conspiracy to murder Sergei Skripal, attempted murder of Sergei Skripal, his daughter Yulia, and Detective Sergeant Nick Bailey, a police officer who went to their house. Use and possession of Novichok, contrary to the Chemical Weapons Act, and causing grievous bodily harm with intent to Yulia Skripal and Nick Bailey. So what is the GRU? It's the intelligence arm of the Russian military, with a long track record of undercover operations around the world. Under Vladimir Putin, observers say it's become even more aggressive. Accused of hacking America's 2016 presidential election, operations in Ukraine, and now using nerve agent in Britain. Its prime target in Salisbury was Sergei Skripal, himself a former officer in the GRU. Sergei Skripal, it's thought, was targeted by former colleagues in the GRU because they viewed him as a traitor for working for the British Secret Service MI6. Today was about much more than just naming two individuals, but also, in the government's eyes, exposing the role of the GRU. And the Prime Minister made clear that, as well as the public accusation, British intelligence would be asked to do more to counter the GRU's activities out of sight. Today, Russia's deputy ambassador was summoned to the Foreign Office. Moscow has said it doesn't recognise the names of the two men accused.
The media have been reporting statements by British officials regarding suspects in the Salisbury and Amesbury case. Russia is being linked to it. The names and photographs published in the media do not mean anything to us.
The British government acknowledges there's no real chance they will be extradited, but it will be hoping that today increases the pressure on Moscow.
Gordon Carrera with that report from London. The head of the Health Ministry says embarrassing audit findings concerning the embattled county's Manukau DHB have not been swept under the carpet. An official audit released late yesterday reveals financial reporting irregularities by DHB senior managers that could have been designed to avoid external scrutiny. The ministry's chief executive, Ashley Bloomfield, says there were no conclusions of wrongdoing, but the audit report points to a lack of transparency over some decisions. He told health correspondent Karen Brown that he was especially troubled by reported surpluses for health conferences that actually went into the red by close to $1 million, and failures to accurately report on the costs of a more than $10 million building, Ko Awatea 2, at Middlemore Hospital.
There was no fraud involved there, but however it just did not look good.
So how did that come about?
I'm not sure exactly how it came about. What I'm really interested in is making sure it doesn't happen again.
But given that these are serious allegations, and given one of the key players, and that's Geraint Martin, who's in a prominent position now in Wellington, are saying that basically it's been all done behind the scenes and there's no natural justice. Given all the questions throughout the report left open by Viti Vali, every paragraph says we didn't speak to the person involved. Doesn't that require further analysis?
I think there's enough information from this review to send a really clear message to chairs and chief executives, and that's what I've done, about not just meeting accounting standards, but being really clear about expectations on the public sector and the importance of meeting their accountability and the high ethical standards that I and the public would hold them to. The second question you've raised is around the issue of natural justice. What I can say is that both Geraint and those others who are named in the report did receive a copy of the draft report and had the opportunity to comment on that. At that point in time, they also had the opportunity, if they had exercised it and had requested an opportunity to be interviewed, I would have happily given them that opportunity. They also did receive the final report a couple of weeks ago, told that it was going to be published, and again offered the opportunity to comment on that.
Did they?
The only comment we received back was from Geraint saying that he would be making a statement at the time and that he didn't feel the process, that he hadn't had the opportunity to comment during the process or be interviewed. As I say, I'm confident that we gave the opportunity for Geraint and others to comment on the draft report, and indeed to come back to us when we let them know that the final report was to be published.
And they haven't?
And they haven't, aside from letting us know they would be making a statement, which Geraint has.
Are you happy, as the Chief Executive of the Ministry, to have so many gaps basically left open and just now closed?
I'm not happy about the events that happened, and I have sent that really clear message. This isn't closing off the process. The report has gone back to the Counties Manukau District Health Board, and I know that they are seeking further advice, recalling that there had been earlier work done, and there's another earlier audit that had been done that in fact led to this report. I'm confident that the board will take good advice and will see if there is anything else that needs to be pursued. It was clear to me that at this juncture I had enough information to be able to send a very strong message to District Health Board chairs and chief executives. That's my role and that's what I've done. However, I'm relying on the District Health Board, which has access to all the people and all the relevant information, to follow through if there's any further action to be required at the District Health Board.
The earlier audit report, who is that done by and will that be released?
So that was a report that was asked for by the board in the middle of last year, and it was done by the internal audit function which sits in Health Alliance. And so it was off the back of that report that the then chair, Dr Lester Levy, came and asked the State Services Commission and the Ministry of Health to have a look further.
Will you release that report to us?
That's not my report to release. It's with Counties Manukau District Health Board. What I would say is I know they're having a very good look at that report and other information, and they will be seeking further advice.
So no deal, you can assure the public there was no deal to just drop this now?
I can assure the public 100% there was no deal, and I think that the comments that Geraint Martin has made are evidence of that.
Dr Ashley Bloomfield speaking to Karen Brown. To New York now, where health and safety officials are investigating a mystery illness that struck people on an Emirates airline flight from Dubai. 7 crew members and 3 passengers were taken to hospital. The US Centre for Disease Control and Prevention says around 100 people on the overnight flight 203 had complained of feeling unwell. For some, the symptoms were limited to a cough, others had a fever. All were checked by health officials as they disembarked onto the tarmac at JFK in New York. CNN's Bill Carlin has more.
We still need you out of the aisles, and no baggage in the aisles. Folks, the bags out of the aisles, please.
Passengers on Emirates Flight 203 from Dubai to New York City posted videos of police, paramedics, and other responders, many wearing masks and gloves, giving them this very uneasy welcome to Kennedy Airport.
It was a 13-and-a-half-hour flight, about 2 more hours on the ground afterwards.
Passenger Erin Sykes found it unpleasant the entire time because she says from the very beginning, it seemed like half of the people in economy class were very sick.
But they should have never let those people on the plane. I mean, they were like coughing so violently. The bathrooms were unusable by the end.
Federal health officials were immediately notified. They say the most likely cause is a nasty flu bug. Passengers were showing symptoms consistent with an aggressive influenza strain in Mecca, and many of them had spent time there.
No, I mean, it was rather scary to look at them. They're all in masks. When we got off the plane, there were, of course, ambulances.
Some passengers admitted feeling cranky, saying it was a lot of stress being worried about health while being simultaneously delayed.
A bit agitated.
But those who train for these situations said the response seemed proper with no time wasted. We talked about that on the phone with former Port Authority Police Inspector Kenneth Honig, who said with a mystery illness, even one that turns out to be flu, you can't take chances.
They seem to handle it exactly the way we had planned and exercised. Airplane is brought to a remote area, passengers are kept informed, medical personnel come on and interview and then evaluate the people who are sick.
It's former Police Inspector Ken Honan ending that report from Bill Carlin. And everyone on board the plane was asked to fill out a form providing their contact information for the next 3 weeks. A Dargaville vet has cleared the air with some plain speaking about which Northland farm has the cattle disease Mycoplasma bovis, and more to the point, which ones don't. Brian Lowe spoke up at a farmers' meeting in Dargaville today to answer questions he says the Ministry for Primary Industries won't. Lois Williams was there.
There was loud applause for the Dargaville vet from more than 100 farmers who turned up to hear the Ministry divulge the latest information on the dreaded bovis. The cattle disease was confirmed for the first time in Northland last month, but the Ministry's policy is not to reveal the location of infected farms. Brian Lowe waited till the end of the meeting to say what MPI would not, to put an end, he says, to damaging speculation.
There was a lot of rumours going around, who it is, where it could be, what it might be. There are other farmers that are being pointed at. There are a number of farmers around Dargaville that there's Tangamahini, Tangataroria, Poto, the farmers everywhere, they're the positive ones. All I've done is pointed out what everyone knows, just stop the rumours.
Brian Lowe says the infected property is a Dargaville cattle farm whose owner bought Friesian weaners from a Waikato stock agent in April, believing the calves came from Waikato. When they turned out to have Tyleria, a disease that doesn't afflict Waikato stock, he knew something was up. Investigations proved the young bulls came from Canterbury, the region worst affected by Mycoplasma bovis. The Dargaville vet says the farm was put into lockdown immediately and it presents absolutely no risk to other farms.
This farm has been suspect since April, since the animals arrived, and the farmer is a very, very good farmer, and he has been aware since April, and he has ensured that no animal has come into contact on the boundary with other farms. There's strict biosecurity even before it was an infected property.
The Ministry says the Canterbury farm that sold the calves was not known to be infected at the time of sale, but it's since tested positive. Emil Murphy of Biosecurity New Zealand says there may yet be consequences for the stock agent involved, but he says it's important not to blame the farmer who sold the calves.
I've sat across the table from a bunch of farmers who said, look, we did all we could, we tried to do everything right, and we still ended up with this disease. And I think this just speaks to how insidious it is, how hard it is to diagnose and how hard it is to test for.
In spite of that, Mr Murphy says the Ministry is making good progress towards its goal of eradicating bovis. It's discovered 67 infected properties so far, but 30 of them have now been cleared. The cattle cull stands at 37,524 animals, and farmers have been paid compensation of more than $19 million. Emil Murphy says he fully expects those numbers to rise as more properties are tested.
We have just started spring bulk milk surveillance testing. It started in each region about a month after they start to supply, and we've got that coming through. We expect to find a few more infected farms through there that we hadn't seen yet, but we're still having a very good progress on that.
Mr Murphy says farmers buying in stock should assess the risk by the farm and stock history, not by the region. But Brian Lowe sees it differently.
It is between $50 and $100 per head cheaper to buy a Friesian bull from Canterbury than it is to buy a local. That is a huge risk, a huge risk. That places a community under risk of mycoplasma as well.
While Northland has only one confirmed farm with Mycoplasma bovis, there are now 8 farms on watch, which may have been exposed to the disease. For Checkpoint, Lois Williams.
The Environment Ministry has come under fire for not having more information about how much plastic there is in New Zealand's oceans. Today, the Select Committee for the Environment heard from officials about what they know about the depth of our plastic problem. National MP Scott Simpson told them he doesn't think they know enough. Laura Dooney was there.
The Ministry for the Environment is not sure how much plastic is in the water around New Zealand or where it is all coming from. A ministry official, Tanisha Vital, told MPs it's hard to know if plastics in the water come from New Zealand or from other countries.
Once it's in the ocean, it circulates to all of our shores, not just us. So
to monitor that type of plastic, it depends also what type of state we get it when it comes to our shores. The only way to really segregate that out is looking at the logos of an international context.
She says there are 10 main rivers worldwide that are washing plastic into the sea, and some of it could be washing up here. But National's Environment spokesperson Scott Simpson says that's not good enough. He says the Environment Committee wants to know how much plastic is in the country's coastal waters, where it's come from, and what it's made of.
It strikes me as strange that the Ministry for the Environment doesn't have information relating to those sorts of questions, isn't able to provide data or any useful information to a Parliamentary Select Committee. That does strike me as unusual.
He says the Ministry should have given some thought to how the scale of the problem could be figured out.
Part of the reason that this committee is asking these questions is because we don't know the answer as parliamentarians either. And this is an opportunity for MPs to quiz officials, but also to quiz a range of NGOs and other organisations who have an interest in marine space.
Mr Simpson concedes the previous government probably didn't do enough to tackle the issue. The environmental charity Sustainable Coastlines has been running large-scale beach cleanups over the last 9 years. Its General Manager, Riley Webster, says his group is working with the Ministry for the Environment to develop a nationwide database of litter on beaches.
We're working with them over the next 3 years to develop that methodology and actually go around the country and help groups to understand it and to get on board with it.
Riley Webster says New Zealanders can't afford to leave the problem to the Ministry to deal with. It's everyone's responsibility. And an Associate Professor at the University of Canterbury, Sally Gore, says figuring out how much plastic New Zealand's putting in the sea is a useful but difficult task.
If we know what plastics New Zealand is producing, and there's quite a lot of people, and I'm part of some consortia as well, that are trying to get funding money to find out, sort of what the plastic burden from New Zealand is coming versus what might be coming from other places. There is sort of an interest to do that, because then that we can start thinking about how we might manage it. We can always manage the plastic that we produce in New Zealand. It's going to be much harder for us to stop other people's plastic coming to us.
Sally Gore agrees it is very hard to differentiate between plastic from here and plastic that's travelled a long distance to our shores. In Wellington, for Checkpoint, ko Laura Dunia ho.
Athletes are praising a move by the World Surf League to introduce equal prize money for men and women. The pay equality comes into effect from the 2019 season at all events controlled by the governing body for professional surfers. It's being celebrated as a significant moment for women in sport. The ABC's Sarah Segdi reports.
Former professional surfer Kate Wilkins was running a surf school for girls in northern New South Wales when she got the news.
It's a big moment for women in surfing, but also I think just women in sport and women in general.
Now a talent pathway coach with Surfing Australia, she's witnessed the push for pay equality throughout her career.
It's been a big journey, and it's been something I was very passionate about as a surfer and competing myself on tour. There was a great group of women that were all pushing for the same thing, which was, equality within our sport, and just having a strong voice and being able to have a platform to express that was quite challenging back in the day. But there was really strong women and really some great minds in the history of women's surfing.
The World Surf League has announced that as of next year, men and women will get the same prize money. Sophie Goldschmidt is the chief executive of the governing body for professional surfers.
For us, it was the right next natural step. Since 2013, we've seen a lot of progress. We've added a number of events for the women. We're now taking them to many of the best locations around the world. We've increased prize money gradually in that time. And we've also increased the investment and resources that we're putting into the women's side of the sport. So this was an inevitable next step.
It's also won the praise of tennis champion Billie Jean King, who was a pioneer of equality in sport. Australian surf champion Stephanie Gilmore is also on board, saying the prize money is fantastic, but the message means even more. Sophie Goldschmidt wants surfing to inspire further equality in sport.
I hope so, yeah. I think this change in society is really positive. We're very proud to be the first US base global sports league to be doing this and one of the first internationally.
World Surf League CEO Sophie Goldschmidt ending that report from the ABC. After 6 o'clock tonight, more from Japan, where 2 people have now been confirmed dead, at least 140 injured and 40 people remain missing following a 6.7 magnitude quake in the northern island of Hokkaido. Plus, veteran activist Penny Bright speaks from her hospital bed where she is gravely ill with ovarian cancer. She says she holds Auckland Council responsible for her illness. And we're off to the races. Cambridge Raceway holds its first harness race meeting today since the industry was rocked by allegations of corruption earlier this week. Don't forget, you can get in touch by texting us on 2101. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ and Facebook us.
RNZ News at 6, Maloe Lele. Good evening, ko Katrina Batten aho. The Prime Minister has asked the Cabinet Office to issue guidance to ministers on using personal email accounts for government business. It comes after the Broadcasting Minister struggled in Parliament yesterday to answer questions from National's broadcasting spokesperson Melissa Lee about what she had used her Gmail account for. Claire Curran requested personal leave this morning, which meant she wasn't available to answer more questions from Ms Lee. Ms Curran was demoted from Cabinet and stripped of 2 of her portfolios last month after she failed to properly declare a meeting for the second time. The Energy and Resources Minister Megan Woods answered on her behalf today but was unable to provide any detailed answers as she didn't have the information to hand. The sidelined Minister Meka Whaitiri has appeared at Parliament for the first time since coming under investigation over a staffing matter. Ms Whaitiri has been working from her Ikaroa Rāwhiti electorate after she was stood aside as Customs Minister last week. Here's our political reporter Craig McCulloch.
Ms Whaitiri was back in Parliament to mark the passing of a treaty settlement bill for the iwi and hapu of Wairoa this afternoon. She says she's proud to be the local MP and to celebrate the historic $100 million settlement with her people. Ms Whaitiri declined to answer any questions about the inquiry, apart from to say she was fully cooperating. The investigation by Ministerial Services is expected to take 2 to 3 weeks. From Parliament, Craig McCulloch.
Formal complaints have been laid against the Deputy Police Commissioner Wally Homaha, accusing him of bullying. An inquiry is already underway into Mr Homaha's appointment, led by a senior lawyer, Mary Scholtens. The inquiry was sparked when it emerged Mr Homaha made comments in 2004 defending police officers accused of raping Louise Nicholas in the 1990s. In Parliament this afternoon, the Justice Minister Andrew Little confirmed 2 complaints have been laid. They've been handed on to the Independent Police Conduct Authority. At least 2 people are now known to have died and 30 are missing after a powerful 6.7 magnitude earthquake hit Japan's northern island of Hokkaido this morning. Yesterday, the region was soaked by the remnants of Typhoon Jebi as it passed across the country. The ABC's Jake Sturmer is in Tokyo.
Landslides wiped out homes in the town of Itsuma, and rescuers fear that people are still trapped inside their homes. The magnitude 6.7 quake hit in the early hours of this morning. Hokkaido's 3 million residents are without power, and the island's nuclear plant has been forced onto emergency generators. The country's nuclear regulator says no irregularities have been reported at the plant. Strong tremors could be felt for as long as a week after the quake.
Jake Sturmer in Tokyo. A watchdog in Australia has described the behaviour of a former New Zealand council head as the very embodiment of corruption. Roger Kerr-Newell was fired from the Shire of Halls Creek in Western Australia for serious misconduct and was previously the chief executive of the Hutt City, New Plymouth and Rodney District Councils. Eva Corlett reports.
Roger Kerr-Newell was head of the Shire of Halls Creek since 2013. In a report, the Corruption and Crime Commission says Mr Kerr-Newell used his position to give a job to a woman he was in an intimate relationship with. He let her write the job description, failed to disclose their relationship and increased her pay by $6,000 each year for 4 years. The Commission says Mr Kerr-Newell also failed to disclose his financial interest in 3 wind farm companies. It says he also wrote down annual leave as time off in lieu and was given about $78,000 of ratepayers' money as a result. Ko Eva Corlett, Tēnei.
A Dargaville vet has warned farmers not to buy cattle from Canterbury because they risk importing Mycoplasma bovis. Brian Lowe told a farmers' meeting today that Northland's first confirmed case of the disease is on a farm that had bought calves from Canterbury, believing they were from Waikato. Mr Lowe says there's no risk of the Dargaville farm spreading the disease because the animals haven't left it. But he says a farmer client has told him he can buy Canterbury Friesian bulls up to $100 cheaper than Northland animals.
That particular farmer preferred to save the money and accept the risk. That is a huge risk, a huge risk. That places a community under risk of mycoplasma as well.
Vet Brian Lowe. The Ministry for Primary Industry says Canterbury still has the most farms infected, but they're a tiny percentage of all farms in the region, and buyers should gauge the risk by stock history, not by the region. It's exactly 6:05. Sport. The 13-time Grand Slam winner Novak Djokovic has ended the run of unseeded Australian John Millman at the US Tennis Open in New York. Djokovic advanced to his 11th US Open semi-final with his win over Millman, who toppled Roger Federer in the previous round. Djokovic says while he won in straight sets, it was far from easy victory over a player he has a lot of respect for.
He's been known around the tour as a guy with a hard-working ethics, and you can see that. He's never going to hand you the win, so yeah, he played an amazing tournament.
Novak Djokovic. The most capped silver fern, Irene van Dijk, says new coach Nolene Taurua faces a major challenge to coach both the national side and her Australian club side. Not only will Taurua have to turn the side around after their disappointing Commonwealth Games effort, but also make them competitive for the World Cup in Liverpool in July.
Being a Silver Ferns coach is a 24/7 job. Coaching a franchise team is a 24/7 job too. But like Noel said, her family are right behind her, and obviously Netball New Zealand, Netball Australia and Lightning Netball are right behind her and would put everything into place for her to be able to cope.
Irene van Dijk. Canterbury have been fined a record $250,000 by the National Rugby League for their Mad Monday end-of-season celebrations after images of players stripped naked and passed out on a Sydney street were published in the media. It's the biggest fine the NRL has ever handed down for behavioural issues. That's the news.
An insider attacks Trump.
I think this is the most extraordinary thing I have ever seen, and I have seen a lot.
2 Russian assassins are named.
The 2 individuals named by the police and CPS are officers from the Russian Military Intelligence Service.
And questions about personal email use in the government.
This minister has offended not once, not twice, and it seems I have no idea what other correspondence are actually in her personal Gmail.
Delivered to you every day. Morning Report with Susie Ferguson and Guy and Espiner, weekdays from 6.
Then on 9 to noon, a strong hospitality sector needs staff. Can young people be convinced it's a good career option? And after 10, UCLA cognitive scientist Greg Bryant explains how to tell fake laughter from genuine. Join me, Lynn Freeman, and for Catherine Ryan on 9 to noon after Morning Report on RNZ National.
Met service weather through to midnight tomorrow. Northland, Auckland, Coromandel Peninsula and Bay of Plenty. Cloudy periods and showers clearing from Auckland southwards this afternoon and easing in Northland. Showers returning tomorrow afternoon. Strong or gale southeasterlies about the Bay of Plenty tomorrow morning and afternoon. Waikato to North Taranaki, including Western Taupō and Taumaranui, fine spells increasing. South Taranaki to Wellington, cloudy periods and isolated showers. South or southeast gales in exposed places. Gisborne, Hawke's Bay, Eastern Taupō Ranges and Taihape, rain heavy at times with possible thunderstorms tomorrow. Southerlies, gale in exposed places. Wairarapa, mostly cloudy with showers, southerlies, gale in exposed places. Coastal Marlborough and North Canterbury, cloudy with isolated showers. For the remainder of the South Island, mainly fine, however, cloudy periods about South Canterbury and North Otago. And for the Chatham Islands, occasional rain with southeast gales slowly easing. It's 6:08 and you're listening to Checkpoint.
Kia ora Katrina, I'm Sharon Brett Kelly, and for John Campbell. 2 people have died and up to 140 injured in a quake that struck the northern Japanese island of Hokkaido burying and damaging a number of homes. Authorities say at least 40 people remain missing. The 6.7 magnitude quake, which was centred about 100 kilometres southeast of Sapporo, occurred just after 3 in the morning local time. Japan's public broadcaster NHK has this update.
The quake triggered landslides, caused widespread damage and left the whole of Japan's Northern Island prefecture without power. Strong aftershocks have followed and thousands of rescue crews are being mobilised. Evacuation orders have been issued in some areas. The quake hit shortly after 3 a.m. on the western part of the island, leaving everyone in the dark. The meteorological agency estimates the magnitude was 6.7, and there have been dozens of aftershocks since then.
In areas where shaking was strong, the danger of houses collapsing and landslides could be very high. Pay attention to upcoming seismic activity and rainfall. Don't come into dangerous areas unless it's necessary, and be careful to look out for your own safety.
Near the epicenter, landslides wiped out homes in Atsuma. All of the missing are from this town. Helicopter crews are carrying out rescue operations, but rescue workers are frantically searching for 5 people buried in the rubble. A resident told NHK the tremors were at a scale he'd never experienced before. The extent of the damage is still being assessed, but throughout the prefecture, buildings are tilted and roads are cracked and buckled.
I think it's the first time such a big earthquake hit this town. My house and shop are a mess.
The tremors were really intense. Everything is broken in my house.
Prime Minister Shinzo Abe says his government has set up an emergency task force that's putting a priority on search and rescue. He says 25,000 self-defense troops will be sent. Evacuation shelters are being set up in many towns and cities.
I was sleeping and the tremors came suddenly. I immediately got up. When I tried to open the door, it started shaking violently. So I clung onto the door and went outside.
Things are scattered everywhere in my house. I came here because I thought I needed to escape to somewhere with more space and food.
And that was residents of the town of Atsuma on the northern island of Hokkaido, ending that report from Japanese public broadcaster NHK. Penny Bright, Auckland's controversial anti-corruption campaigner, is gravely ill in hospital with ovarian cancer and says she holds Auckland Council responsible. Ms Bright was given until yesterday to live by doctors at Auckland Hospital, but epitomising her life, she is continuing to fight on. She invited Zach Fleming to the hospital this afternoon and told him she blames Auckland Council for causing the stress that she believes worsened her cancer. But she says if given the chance, she wouldn't change a thing.
I have just been fighting. And on the day of my deathbed, I sent off a Privacy Act request to the CEO of Auckland Council, Stephen Town.
Still fighting.
Because I understand that Auckland Council have spent over $1 million pursuing me.
Why do you understand that? Where did you get that figure from?
Oh no, impeccable.
$1 million pursuing you? What do you mean
by
pursuing?
Just the total amount of costs involved in fighting me. And anyway, so I've done the Privacy Act request. I want a full breakdown. But the value of my disputed rates is $20,000. $1 million is 50 times that.
They would say, if I can play devil's advocate with you, they would say that they were required to spend that money because they needed to set an example.
Well, I call bollocks on that, on the basis that Auckland Council in-house legal staff, their primary responsibility is to uphold the rule of law. And the Public Records Act is not being implemented or upheld. And what I've tried to do is to work with them to fix it. And no, they've been out to crush me. I believe that Auckland Council is responsible for how I am. The stress has been enormous, and it's just gone. It just went straight to my guts.
Would you have done anything differently now that you are here? Would you have spent the last decade, 2 decades of your life doing the public service job that you have tried to do? If you had that hindsight?
Probably not, but what gets me is who the hell is holding Auckland Council accountable to the rule of law.
Do you think that you were the only one doing that?
In this area, yep.
Why was it so important to you to do this?
Because we've been bled dry. We don't know where billions of dollars of rates money is being spent on private sector consultants and contractors, and New Zealand's supposed to be the least corrupt country in the world. Well, if we're the least corrupt, we should be the most transparent. It's just bullshit. Yeah.
That's what you've been asking for this entire time, right? Just a rundown on how much money is spent on what private contractor.
What I want is the Public Records Act 2005, Section 17, to be upheld, which is that every public body and local authority must create and maintain full and accurate records in accordance with prudent business practice, including all matters contracted out to independent contractors. It's the law. It's the law.
How many times do you think you've said that out loud?
Oh, God. Well...
Why do you think they won't give you what you want, what you've been asking for so long?
Because they're completely conflicted. That to provide this transparency, to open the box, people can start looking then and they know where the money's going.
What would you hope that you would leave for a legacy? Like, what would you hope that if people look back in 20 years and think Penny Bright, what would you hope they think? And hopefully you're still here with us in 20 years, but what would you hope?
Someone who stuck to her guns and tried to get Auckland Council held accountable to the rule of law, namely the Public Records Act, because in my view, as an anti-corruption campaigner, their full implementation and enforcement of the Public Records Act would completely transform transparency in New Zealand. And it's not just local government, but it's central government as well. Yeah.
Do you think when you hopefully do walk out of here, do you think that you will keep doing this fight? Do you think you'll keep fighting this fight? Or is this it for Penny Bright in terms of fighting for the Public Records Act?
It's ingrained in my DNA. Yeah, no. Well, obviously I'm a bit wing-clipped at the moment.
Just at the moment?
Well, in saying that though, I mean, here I am wing-clipped, supposedly on my deathbed, and I've had more attention being paid to what I've been bleating on about for the last 20 years.
Does that frustrate you?
Better late than never.
Why are you letting me be here? Like, why are you letting me come in here and talk to you?
Seize the moment. If there is finally a lot more public interest in what's happening, yeah, I'm happy to talk to anybody, help get the message out.
As a result of your long fight, you lived a pretty, frugal is the wrong word, but you didn't live a lavish life. You spent your time and energy trying to do a public service as opposed to trying to make Penny Bright rich. Was that worth it?
Yeah. I wouldn't change anything. I wouldn't change anything.
And that was Penny Bright, the Auckland campaigner, talking to Zach Fleming. Cambridge Raceway is holding the first harness racing meeting since the industry hit the headlines this week. 10 people have been charged with race fixing and possession and supply of drugs after a 17-month-long police investigation. Among those charged are well-known trainers and drivers who have now been banned from every racecourse in the country. Industry leaders have expressed shock at the news, but what do people on the ground think? Our reporter Annika Smith is at Cambridge Raceway, where she asked trainer Willie Fleming if he was surprised at the news.
Did really, to be so widespread apparently. Yeah, quite a shock really.
What was your reaction to it?
Well, I was a bit horrified really. Feel sorry for the young guys, the young trainers that are probably going to find it hard now to attract new owners. The stigma, is going to hang around for a bit. And yeah, I just hope if it turns out, they're not guilty until proven so, but if that is the case, I hope they're dealt to properly.
How do you think this will affect the industry, this week's news?
Well, just reading little bits on Facebook and comments that come through, it's all pretty negative, and people saying they're not going to back horses because they're a bunch of cheats and such like. So it's rubbed off in a bigger way than just a few. Yeah. So,
and do you worry for the industry?
Oh well, definitely. Yeah, it's not good. I mean, we're struggling as it is, and then to have this on top of it, it's about the worst timing of anything really. Yeah.
I spoke to the chairman of Harness Racing New Zealand last night. He said that it let down the many people that did follow the rules. Do you think that's the case?
Yeah, yes, definitely. Yeah. I mean, you try and follow the rules, and you get someone who jumps in and buggers it up for everyone else. It's very, very, very disappointing.
And that was Willie Fleming of Hawera speaking to our reporter Annika Smith. Let's go live now to Annika at a very chilly Cambridge Raceway. Annika, how are people there feeling about what's happened this week?
Yes, Sharon, it is a very cold night here in Cambridge. There's about 50 odd people that have turned out to the 9 race meeting. Every single person I've spoken to has expressed their shock and disappointment at this week's news. One trainer said if anything good could come out of the scandal, it was that the Racing Integrity Unit, which polices this industry, is doing their job, but this, of course, comes at a price. And that's the reputation of the sport.
Annika, thanks very much. That's our reporter Annika Smith at the Cambridge Raceway. Donald Trump is demanding that the New York Times unmask the anonymous senior administration official who wrote a commentary for the newspaper, alleging that cabinet officials had discussed ousting him from power. The president says for national security reasons, the author of the article must be handed over to the US government. The BBC's Chris Buckler reports.
Each day seems to bring new claims about what's happening behind the doors of this White House and the unconventional president in charge here. The New York Times says it was a senior official in Donald Trump's own administration who wrote its damning opinion piece, although the author insisted on remaining anonymous. They claim the president's leadership style is impetuous, adversarial, petty and ineffective, that many are working diligently from within to frustrate parts of his own agenda and his worst inclinations, and that the root of the problem is the president's amorality.
And God bless you and thank you, Mr. President.
Mr. Trump was meeting a group of sheriffs when he was forced to answer questions about keeping control in what's being painted as a lawless White House.
If the failing New York Times has an anonymous editorial, can you believe it? Anonymous. Meaning gutless, a gutless editorial. We're doing a great job. The poll numbers are through the roof. Our poll numbers are great. And guess what? Nobody is going to come close to beating me in 2020 because of what we've done.
But fear. A new book written by Bob Woodward, one of the journalists who exposed the Watergate scandal, is making similar allegations that many are working to protect America from its president. The anonymous official, quoted in the New York Times, expresses concern about Mr. Trump's preference for leaders like Kim Jong-un and Vladimir Putin over America's traditional allies, and claims that the president resisted attempts to take action against Russia after the poisoning of a former spy in the UK. In a furious statement, the White House Press Secretary Sarah Sanders said about the official who wrote the article, "This coward should do the right thing and resign." But the New York Times said it was proud to have published the piece, which it insisted gave the public a real insight into the workings of the Trump administration from someone in a position to know.
Chris Buckler in Washington. Well, it's a David and Goliath battle across the Tasman. The residents of a tiny village in Victoria's high country are refusing to back down in their fight to stop local water being extracted and bottled by the Japanese-owned beverage company Asahi. After losing a 5-year legal battle, the Stanley community is turning to the Court of Public Opinion in the hope of persuading the state government to change the law. The ABC's Kathy Van Extel reports.
Stanley is a very small community about 9 k's out of Beechworth, which is a high-value orchard area with nuts, stone fruits, that kind of thing. Very pretty.
Stanley, with a population of 364, is part of the Indigo Shire in Victoria's northeast high country. The local mayor, Jenny O'Connor, is one of the leading campaigners against the bottled water industry.
What happened initially was that an orchard was bought and converted the licence to commercial, then started extracting that water, putting it straight from the bore into big B double tankers. And as I said, there's little narrow, windy roads, on those roads, taking them out of the state, actually, interstate to New South Wales, on the border there to bottle that water.
The water is going to the Albury bottling plant of Japanese-owned beverage company Asahi. In April, the Stanley community lost a 4-year court battle against the water extraction. Ed Tyree is the president and chairman of Stanley Rural Community Inc.
We were too late to object to the issue of the water licence, the Goulburn water, and so we looked for other ways to help, and we started a legal action through VCAT, later through the Supreme Court, appealing against the VCAT decision all the way to the appeals court.
They not only lost the legal battle, Stanley Rural Community Inc. was also ordered to pay $90,000 in costs. It's now launched a social media campaign to raise funds and muster support. So far, 124,000 people have signed a petition calling on Asahi to stop taking the water from Stanley. Ed Tyree again.
Stanley is not a municipality with town water. We depend on rainwater for everything, for irrigation, domestic, stock, and the water irrigates a very high quality agricultural plateau. So the issue is more a social and moral issue now. It's about corporate giants like Asahi thinking they can ignore the impacts their operations have on communities and the environment.
The community is also lobbying the Victoria government to change the law. Mayor Jenny O'Connor says the bottled water industry is a national concern.
There has to be political kind of pressure, really. On one hand, it's quite a small town and it's not a huge amount of water, but we're already seeing across the country that once the water miners get in and get their hands on licences, there's actually no limit really to how much they can take. It should be a major concern for all of us. It's happening right across the country. In Alpine Shire next door to us, there's already, I think it's 200 megalitres a year now can be extracted and used for bottled water. Nobody knows, including the water authorities, how much water is actually in those aquifers. And once it's gone, it's gone. And in the millennial drought, Stanley virtually ran dry. There's no mechanism at the moment within the Water Act to restrict the use of commercially extracted water. So there's a range of issues about not only the impact on the community currently, but real concerns about, well, what's the future here, particularly with climate change and the need to protect agriculture.
Jenny O'Connor, she's the Mayor of Indigo Shire in Victoria's Northeast High Country, ending that report from the ABC. Lots of feedback on petrol prices. Earlier in the program we reported the average price of fuel is now the highest it's been in more than 30 years, and it could soon get even more expensive. The price of 91 octane has now exceeded $2.30 a litre nationally, with some parts of New Zealand paying $2.50. Use your AA card. Last week I put in $111 worth of gas in and paid $12. That's from Hugh McMillan. In Paraparaumu, petrol is $2.29 per litre. This is talking about petrol prices, obviously. Feeling very good about my recent purchase of a Nissan Leaf, but needs government support for more charging stations on state highways. That's Simon Davis in Wellington. Try $2.69 a litre on Waiheke and even more on Great Barrier. That was from another listener this evening. Well, that's Checkpoint for this evening. Thanks for joining us on your radio, your television, online, or however you chose to connect with us today. You can catch up on our stories tonight on rnz.co.nz/checkpoint or on our Facebook page. And for all the latest news, information, feature stories from New Zealand and around the world, go to the rnz.co.nz homepage. From me, Sharon Brett Kelly, and the team, have a great night.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. The controversial Waimea Community Dam, rejected last week by the Tasman District Council, is back on the table, with councillors deciding tonight to consider a revised funding proposal. The Prime Minister has asked the Cabinet Office to issue guidance to ministers on using personal email accounts for government business, after questions were asked of the Broadcasting Minister. The sidelined Minister, Meka Whaitiri, has appeared at Parliament for the first time since standing aside as Customs Minister while a staffing matter was investigated. Formal complaints of bullying have been laid against the Deputy Police Commissioner, Wally Homaha. And Novak Djokovic is through to his 11th US Open semi-final, ending the run of the unseeded Australian John Millman, who earlier toppled Roger Federer. Our next news and weather is at 7.
You know that little sticker on fruit